Marriage is one of the deepest covenants two souls can ever enter. Yet sometimes it feels like that sacred bond has been stretched to the breaking point. Perhaps you've looked at your spouse and wondered where the tenderness went, where the laughter disappeared, where the connection that once set your heart on fire seemed to fade into routine and silence. The truth is, even the strongest unions face storms, and those storms are not always a sign of the end, but often the very place where God chooses to rebuild. What looks shattered to your eyes can become the very canvas where He paints restoration. That is why you are here, because this is not just another message, it is heaven's whisper telling you that change is possible, that love can breathe again, and that your home can still become a place of peace and joy. But restoration begins in a place most people try to avoid. It begins within. It's easier to point fingers, to list the ways your spouse should change, to replay the moments that cut deep. Yet the power of renewal starts when you allow God to soften your own heart, to tear down the walls of pride and bitterness that time has built. When you decide to forgive even when it feels undeserved, when you choose to let go of the past instead of carrying it like a heavy chain, you unlock a door for healing to walk in. Forgiveness does not erase the wound, but it stops the wound from controlling your future. And as you take that step, you will find that what seemed dead is not gone forever. It has simply been waiting for the touch of God's hand. Every tear you have cried in silence has been collected by the one who sees all. He knows the nights you prayed for change, the mornings you woke up carrying invisible pain, the days you put on a smile while your heart was breaking. None of it has gone unnoticed. Those tears are seeds, and God is watering them with His promise of restoration. You may not see the fruit yet, but roots are growing beneath the surface. The very cracks in your marriage are becoming the places where His light will shine brightest. And when that light breaks through, what once felt like ashes will turn into beauty. What once seemed like an ending will become the beginning of a testimony powerful enough to inspire generations after you. When two lives come together under the covenant of marriage, the journey begins with dreams, with promises, and with the belief that nothing could ever break what has been joined by love. Yet along the way, life brings unexpected pressures, financial burdens, miscommunication, unmet expectations, and wounds from words spoken in anger. Slowly, the flame that once burned bright begins to flicker. But listen to me, a flickering flame is not a dead flame. Even if it feels fragile, the spark of love is still there. And God has the power to breathe on that spark until it becomes a fire again. Do not believe the lie that what is broken cannot be repaired. The one who created marriage designed it not to collapse under the weight of trials, but to endure, to reflect His faithfulness, and to become a testimony of His power. That is why He has brought this word to you, so you will not give up. When you are so close to the turning point, healing begins the moment you choose to see your marriage, not through the lens of disappointment, but through the eyes of hope. Yes, there are scars. Yes, there are words that cannot be unsaid. But scars are not a sign of death. They are proof of survival, proof that even though the wounds were deep, you are still standing. And in the same way, your marriage can stand. What God asks of you is not to control the other person, not to force change by demand, but to let Him transform you first. When your heart is filled with grace, when your words shift from criticism to encouragement, when your actions reflect patience instead of frustration, you set an atmosphere where healing can take root. That change may not happen overnight, but little by little, God begins to rebuild what seemed impossible. Do not underestimate the power of prayer spoken in faith. There's a supernatural shift that happens when you stop complaining about your spouse and start interceding for them. Every whispered prayer invites the presence of God into your home, and where His presence dwells, peace cannot be denied. Picture the walls of resentment that have been built over years. Every prayer is like a hammer, striking those walls until they crumble. Every declaration of love, even when you don't feel it, is a seed being planted. And just as a seed takes time to break through the soil, so too will your marriage bloom in its season. God has not forgotten you. He is not ignoring your cries. He is moving even now, and though you may not see it yet, restoration is already underway. There is a truth you must hold tightly to. Love is not merely an emotion that comes and goes like the waves of the sea. It is a decision, a daily choice, to remain, to forgive, to believe again even when disappointment tries to silence hope. Emotions are fragile, they rise and fall, but a decision anchored in God's strength carries a power that feelings alone cannot sustain. When you stand before Him and renew your choice to fight for your marriage, you align yourself with His design, and He equips you with strength beyond your own. What seems unbearable to you becomes possible with His help. And though you may feel like you've been carrying the weight of this fight alone, the truth is that heaven has been carrying you all along. The battle has never been yours, it belongs to the Lord, and He has already declared victory where you see defeat. Sometimes, the greatest miracle is not in God changing the circumstances instantly, but in Him transforming your heart to endure until the breakthrough comes. Every time you choose to respond with kindness instead of anger, every time you choose to listen instead of shutting down, you are sowing seeds of change. Do not despise small beginnings. Do not overlook the little moments where God is already at work. A softer tone in your spouse's voice, a willingness to sit together longer, a small gesture of affection that once felt lost. These are glimpses of the restoration that is unfolding. If you treasure these moments and water them with gratitude, they will grow into greater signs of healing. But hear this clearly, restoration is not just about returning to what you once had. It is about building something stronger, deeper, and more unshakable than before. What God restores, He multiplies. What He touches, He transforms beyond recognition. The love He is birthing in your marriage will not simply echo the past, it will surpass it. And when you stand in the fullness of that renewal, you will realize that the storm was not meant to destroy you, but to bring you to a place of greater intimacy. Not just with your spouse, but with the God who sustains you both. What felt like the breaking of your marriage was, in truth, the breaking of the ground for a harvest of joy that is now coming. Hold on, for you are closer than you think. Every marriage carries within it the weight of two stories, to pasts, to sets of wounds, and to dreams that must somehow become one. And the truth is, sometimes those past wounds bleed into the present, poisoning moments that should be filled with love and tenderness. But what you must remember is that God did not join you to live as enemies under the same roof. He joined you to become one flesh, to carry each other's burdens, to lift each other in weakness, and to celebrate each other's victories. Even if the road feels rough now, the covenant still stands, and the one who sealed it with His blessing is still committed to its survival. He is the glue that holds together what human strength alone cannot. You may feel too tired to fight another day, but God has not lost His strength, and He is ready to pour new breath into your weary soul so you can rise again and believe that reconciliation is possible. Do not let the voice of discouragement convince you that change cannot happen. That voice will remind you of every argument, every failure, every word spoken in haste, and it will try to persuade you that nothing will ever be different. But the voice of truth is louder than the voice of despair. The voice of truth declares that love is stronger than bitterness, that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds, and that nothing is too far gone when God's hand is involved. You must decide which voice to believe. When you choose to silence despair and cling to hope, something shifts in the spiritual realm. The chains that have bound your marriage in resentment begin to fall, and space is made for grace to enter. The enemy may have tried to sow division, but God's plan has always been unity, and unity will always have the final word when you surrender your home into His care. Imagine for a moment what your marriage could look like if you let go of the past and allowed God to write a new chapter. Picture the sound of laughter filling your home again, the joy of sitting together without the tension that weighs down the air, the beauty of intimacy restored where walls once stood. This is not a fantasy. This is the reality God wants for you. But He is waiting for your yes, your willingness to lay down your pride, to extend forgiveness, to believe in love again. The miracle does not begin with them, it begins with you. And as you step into that place of surrender, you will watch as the God of restoration turns what felt like ruins into a temple of peace, a testimony of His goodness, and a home where His presence is welcomed once more. There are seasons in a marriage where it feels like the weight of disappointment crushes even the smallest flicker of hope. You may have tried to speak but felt unheard, tried to reach out but were met with silence, tried to love but were answered with indifference. And in those moments, the enemy whispers that it would be easier to give up, to let go, to believe that nothing will change. But today I need you to understand this. The silence is not the end. The indifference is not the final word. God is not finished with your story. He has seen the nights you lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the vows you once made still matter. And He is telling you now they do. They matter to Him. And because they matter to Him, He is ready to fight for your marriage in ways you cannot imagine. What feels impossible in your strength is already unfolding in His. Think about the battles you have faced together before the storms that threatened to tear you apart. Yet somehow you survived. Those were not accidents. They were testimonies that you are stronger than you think. If you could endure those trials, you can endure this one too. But endurance alone is not the goal. God does not want you merely surviving under the same roof, pretending to coexist. He wants your love to thrive, your intimacy to deepen, your home to radiate peace. And this is where you must allow Him to rebuild not just what was lost, but what was never fully formed. He wants to establish foundations that cannot be shaken, walls that cannot be breached by bitterness, and a covering of love that will protect you in every storm yet to come. Your part is not to carry the entire burden of restoration, but to surrender the weight to God and allow Him to guide your steps. Begin again with simple acts of kindness, with words that bring healing instead of harm, with gestures that remind your spouse that love still breathes between you. Do not underestimate the power of a gentle touch, a sincere apology, or a prayer whispered in the quiet of the night. These are the seeds that, when watered with faith, will bloom into something far greater than you can imagine. And as those seeds take root, you will see that your marriage was not meant to wither in pain, but to flourish as a testimony that with God, nothing is beyond repair. Sometimes the greatest obstacle to restoration is not what your spouse has done, but what your heart continues to replay. The mind can become a prison, chaining you to memories of harsh words, broken promises, and moments of neglect. You find yourself reliving the pain over and over, as if keeping it alive could somehow protect you from being hurt again. But in reality, holding on only deepens the wound. God is calling you today to release those memories into His hands. He does not ask you to pretend they never happened, but He invites you to place them under His grace so that they no longer hold power over your future. The same God who forgave you of your past failures is asking you to extend that same grace, because forgiveness is the key that unlocks the door to freedom for you and for your marriage. When you choose to forgive, you break the cycle of bitterness and make space for healing to flow. Forgiveness is not a weakness, nor is it a license for others to continue hurting you. Forgiveness is strength because it refuses to let the past dictate the future. It is a declaration that love is stronger than resentment, that grace is greater than anger, and that peace has more authority than conflict. And as you take this courageous step, you will notice the atmosphere of your home begin to shift. The heaviness that once lingered in the air will lift, and in its place will come a sense of hope and expectancy that things truly can change. God is not just repairing the cracks in your relationship. He is creating something new, something stronger than before. Restoration with Him is never about returning to the old. It is about stepping into a better tomorrow. Picture a love that is no longer fragile but resilient, no longer easily shaken but deeply rooted in grace. That is what He desires for you. Your marriage is meant to be a reflection of His covenant, a living testimony of His power to redeem what seemed lost. And if you will allow Him, He will turn your story of pain into a story of triumph, your scars into symbols of strength, and your tears into seeds of joy. What feels heavy now will one day be the very testimony that brings light to others, walking through their own darkness. Every marriage reaches a point where the weight of unmet expectations threatens to suffocate the love that once seemed unshakable. You may have dreamed of a future filled with endless joy, only to wake up to the reality of arguments, distance, and misunderstandings. But hear me, unmet expectations do not mean God's promises have failed. They are often the soil where His greatest miracles begin to grow. What feels like disappointment in your story may actually be divine preparation, a refining fire that strips away pride and selfishness so that something pure can be birthed. In those very moments where you feel weakest, He is closest. bending low to whisper that he is not done writing your marriage's story. You thought you were standing at the end, but in truth, you are standing on the edge of a new beginning orchestrated by the hand of God. There's a secret you must understand. Love is not destroyed by conflict, but by indifference. As long as there are emotions, even anger, even frustration, it means the heart still longs for connection. The danger comes when hearts grow cold, when silence becomes louder than words. But even if you find yourself in that place now, there is hope. The same God who raised the dead is capable of igniting a heart that has grown numb. Do not underestimate his ability to stir passion where you thought it had died. He is able to awaken the affection that has been buried under years of hurt and routine. If you dare to believe, he can take the ashes of your pain and breathe fire into them once more, until what once felt cold burns with a warmth you thought was gone forever. And let me remind you of this powerful truth. Your marriage is not just about you and your spouse, it is about legacy. The decisions you make today, the forgiveness you extend, the perseverance you choose, will echo into the lives of your children and generations yet to come. They will either inherit the brokenness of surrender or the testimony of restoration. By choosing to fight, by choosing to stay, by choosing to let God intervene, you are building a foundation that will outlast your lifetime. You are declaring to the world that love, when anchored in him, cannot be defeated. And when that testimony shines through your marriage, others who are drowning in despair will find hope because they saw that you refuse to let the storm win. What God restores in you will become a light that guides countless others back to life. There comes a moment in every struggle when you must decide whether to keep carrying the weight alone or to place it fully in the hands of the one who created marriage in the first place. You have tried conversations that ended in arguments, efforts that were met with resistance, and silent prayers that seemed to go unanswered. Yet what you cannot forget is that God has never abandoned you in this process. The silence of heaven is not absence, it is preparation. While you have been fighting with your own strength, he has been aligning hearts, softening edges, and creating opportunities that you cannot yet see. Trusting him means loosening your grip on control and allowing his spirit to move in ways beyond your understanding. And when you surrender in this way, the very atmosphere of your home will begin to shift, because where his presence dwells, restoration always follows. Do not believe the lie that because things feel broken, they are beyond repair. Some of the most beautiful testimonies are birthed out of the ashes of what seemed impossible. God does not just fix what is broken, he transforms it. He turns pain into purpose, betrayal into healing, distance into intimacy. And though the scars of your past may remain, they will no longer define you. They will remind you of the grace that carried you through. If you look closely, you will realize that even now, in the middle of your pain, there are small signs of God's hand at work. A conversation that lasted a little longer than usual, a glance that carried less tension, a moment of laughter you didn't expect. These are not coincidences. They are glimpses of hope, proof that God is already weaving threads of restoration through the fabric of your relationship. And here's the promise you can hold on to. What God restores is always stronger than what was lost. He does not bring you back to the fragile love of yesterday. He leads you into a love refined by trials, purified by tears, and rooted in his unshakable grace. Imagine a marriage where forgiveness flows easily, where communication is marked by tenderness instead of hostility, where the fire of passion is not dimmed by years but fueled by them. This is the kind of union God desires for you, not a fragile bond easily broken by life's storms, but a covenant so anchored in his presence that nothing can tear it apart. And if you will choose to keep believing, to keep praying, and to keep surrendering, you will live to see that vision become reality. There are days when the weight of the distance feels unbearable, when you sit across from your spouse and it feels like you are looking at a stranger rather than the person you once vowed to love for a lifetime. The silence at the dinner table, the lack of tenderness, the absence of laughter, these things cut deeper than any spoken word. And yet, even in that emptiness, God whispers that it is not the end. He reminds you that love is not something you merely stumble into. It is something you choose, something you nurture, something you fight for when every fiber of your being wants to walk away. And though the pain is real and the wounds are deep, The truth is that God specializes in reviving what feels lifeless. He does not just look at your marriage and see its cracks, he sees its potential, its future, and the testimony it is meant to become. You must also remember that healing begins with perspective. If you continue to see your spouse only through the lens of their mistakes, you will miss the possibility of their growth. If you keep replaying the worst moments, you will blind yourself to the small signs of change that God is already stirring. This is why surrender is essential. Surrender does not mean you stop caring. It means you hand over the burden to God and allow Him to do what you cannot. It means you choose to see your spouse not as an enemy, but as someone who, like you, is flawed, broken, and in desperate need of grace. And when you extend grace, you mirror the very heart of God, the same grace He extends to you every single day. Despite your own failures, do not underestimate the power of speaking life into your marriage. Words are seeds, and every word you release into the atmosphere either waters life or spreads death. If your language is constantly filled with criticism, resentment, and bitterness, it will choke the roots of love. But if you begin to speak words of encouragement, of hope, of faith even when you don't yet feel them, you are sowing seeds that will bear fruit in time. Declare over your marriage that healing is possible. Speak over your spouse that they are loved, valued, and chosen. When your words align with God's promises, the very environment of your home begins to change. And in that environment, hearts that were once hardened will begin to soften, and what was once broken will begin to mend. Every relationship has seasons, and just like the earth itself, marriages go through winters that feel barren, lifeless, and cold. Perhaps you are in that winter now, where affection feels frozen, where conversations end in silence, and where hope seems buried under layers of disappointment. But winter is never the end. It is always a passage to spring. Beneath the frozen soil, life is still moving, roots are still growing, and God is still working. What you see as emptiness is simply preparation for a new beginning. Do not confuse delay with denial. The promises of God for your home are not canceled because of the present struggle. They are being refined, strengthened, and prepared to flourish in ways you have yet to see. This season of winter is only temporary, and if you endure with faith, you will step into a spring of renewal. It is in these seasons of silence that God often does His deepest work. He strips away the illusions, the masks, and the defenses we hide behind, and He reveals the true foundation of love. He teaches patience, humility, and compassion in ways that comfort alone never could. And while you may wish for instant transformation, remember that deep change takes time. A seed does not bloom overnight. It must first break through the soil in hidden places before it can show its beauty to the world. In the same way, the transformation of your marriage may be happening beneath the surface, invisible to the eye, but powerful in the spirit. Do not give up because you do not yet see the flowers. Trust that God is nurturing the roots. Even now, and when the breakthrough comes, it will not simply restore what was lost, but it will establish something stronger, more unshakable, and more deeply rooted in grace. The laughter will return, not shallow as before, but richer because it was born out of struggle. The intimacy will grow deeper, not because everything is perfect, but because love chose to endure through imperfection. And your testimony will not only be for you, it will inspire others who feel trapped in their own winters. They will see your story and believe that if God could bring spring to your marriage, He can bring it to theirs as well. What you are walking through now is not wasted. It is the soil for a greater harvest, a harvest of joy, unity, and love that will stand as a light for generations to come. There's a sacred truth that you must never lose sight of. Your marriage was never meant to be sustained only by human effort, but by divine grace. When you stood and made vows, you did not just speak to each other. You invited God Himself into the covenant. That means you are not walking this path alone. Even when it feels like your strength is gone, His presence is the unseen third strand in the cord that keeps you from unraveling completely. And when you feel like you cannot hold on any longer, He is the one who holds on for you. This is why surrender is so powerful, because the moment you stop relying only on your ability to fix things, God steps in and does what you could never accomplish on your own. What seems unreachable to you is within His grasp, and what looks Impossible to repair is already being restored in His hands. But surrender does not mean passivity. It means choosing actions that align with faith, not fear. It means creating room for God's Spirit to work in your daily interactions, even in the smallest of ways. Instead of responding with anger, choose gentleness instead of closing off. Your heart, choose to listen instead of focusing on what you are not receiving. Choose to give what you can. These small shifts, guided by grace, can melt even the hardest walls of division. Think about it. The walls of Jericho did not fall by force, they fell by obedience and persistence. And the walls between you and your spouse will not fall by shouting or control, but by consistent acts of love, prayer, and trust in God's timing. And when those walls do come down, you'll discover that the love waiting on the other side is not just the love you once had. It is greater, deeper, and refined by the fire of trials. You will look back and realize that what you thought was the breaking of your marriage was actually the breaking of pride, selfishness, and wounds that had to be healed. God does not waste pain. He transforms it. And when you finally step into the fullness of what He has been preparing, you will not just survive together, you will thrive. Your home will become a place of refuge, not tension. Your relationship will become a fountain of joy, not sorrow. And your story will stand as a living testimony that God still breathes life into what seemed lost forever. Every promise God makes carries the weight of eternity. And when He blessed your union, He did not do so with the intention of watching it collapse. What you are facing now is not proof that He has abandoned you, but rather evidence that He is about to reveal His power in a way you have never experienced before. Sometimes the most difficult seasons in a marriage are not punishments, but preparations. They strip away what is weak, they expose what needs healing, and they force us to depend on Him in ways we never had to before. And though you may feel tired of fighting, weary of believing, the truth is that you are closer to breakthrough than you think. The night always feels darkest just before the dawn, and what you are enduring now is the last shadow before the light breaks forth over your home. It is essential that you see your spouse not as the enemy, but as a partner in the same battle. The real enemy has always been division, resentment, and the schemes of darkness that seek to destroy what God has created. When you realize that the fight is not against each other but for each other, your perspective shifts. Instead of rehearsing offenses, you begin to intercede in prayer. Instead of demanding to be understood, you ask God to give you patience and wisdom. This is how walls of hostility are torn down, not by winning arguments, but by surrendering to the spirit of unity. And unity, once restored, has the power to silence every voice of doubt and breathe peace back into your home. Picture your future. If you do not give up here, imagine walking into a home filled with peace rather than tension, where your children see not division but love, where your spouse becomes not a source of pain but a partner in purpose. That is the vision God has for you. He does not just want to restore your marriage for the sake of your happiness, but to establish a testimony that will impact everyone who watches your life. Friends, family, even strangers will look at your story and know that God still heals, still redeems, and still makes all things new. And when you live in that reality, your home will no longer be marked by struggle alone, but by the undeniable presence of the One who turned your sorrow into joy. There is a temptation in moments of deep pain to believe that walking away would be easier, that letting go of the covenant would bring relief from the constant ache. But the truth is that what looks like relief often becomes regret. God never designed marriage to be disposable, something abandoned when it no longer feels convenient. He designed it as a reflection of His own unbreakable love, a bond that endures not because it is free from hardship, but because it is rooted in grace. The very vow you made to love in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, in abundance and in lack was not a promise made lightly. And it is in these very seasons of testing that those words carry their deepest meaning. The weight you feel now is not meant to crush you, but to remind you of the strength of the covenant. And when you lean on God, that weight becomes lighter, because His strength carries what yours cannot. Understand this: God is not simply interested in patching the surface of your marriage. He wants to heal it from the inside out. He wants to address the hidden wounds that have lingered for years, the unspoken frustrations, the secret disappointments, He wants to shine His light into the corners of your heart and your spouse's heart that have remained untouched by grace. This healing will require vulnerability, honesty, and courage, but it will also produce freedom. When walls come down, when masks are removed, when truth is spoken in love, intimacy grows deeper than it ever could on the surface. This is not just about saving a relationship. It is about transforming it into something stronger, purer, and more unshakable than what existed before. And let me speak this over you. Your marriage has a future. Do not let the present struggles convince you that there is no hope beyond today. What you cannot see is that God is already arranging divine appointments, conversations, and moments that will breathe life back into your home. The laughter that has been missing will return, not as an echo of the past, but as a sound of something entirely new. The intimacy that has felt distant will come alive again, not because of human effort alone, but because God Himself is breathing into your covenant. And when that renewal comes, you will not only rejoice in what has been restored, but you will stand amazed at how God turned your deepest valley into a mountain of testimony. There are valleys so deep in marriage that it feels like no light could ever pierce through, where every attempt at reconciliation ends in misunderstanding, and every effort to love feels rejected or ignored. In those valleys, the temptation is to believe that nothing will ever change, that this is simply your reality now. But hear this with clarity. Valleys are not final destinations, they are passages. And just as the shepherd walks with his sheep through the darkest ravines, guiding them to greener pastures, so does God walk with you through this difficult season. He has not abandoned you, even if the silence of your spouse makes you feel unseen. He has not forgotten you, even if the coldness in your home makes you feel unloved. His hand is steady, His voice is whispering, and His plan is unfolding. Even in the shadows you cannot yet see through. What feels like a grave is not your burial ground, it is the very soil where He is preparing new life to spring forth. But transformation does not happen without surrender. The greatest breakthrough in a marriage comes when one heart decides to stop fighting in the flesh and starts fighting in the spirit. You may think, why should I be the one to change? Why should I soften first? Why should I forgive when I am the one who was hurt? Yet that is exactly the place where miracles begin. Because when you lay your pride at the feet of God, you create room for Him to move in ways that human logic cannot explain. Forgiveness becomes more than a word, it becomes an act of faith. Love becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a decision to reflect God's heart. And slowly, but surely, walls of resentment crumble, misunderstandings lose their power, and a bridge of grace is built where division once stood. This is not weakness. This is divine strength, the kind of strength that shakes the foundations of hopelessness and makes way for redemption. Imagine for a moment the testimony waiting on the other side of your perseverance. Picture your home filled with warmth again, laughter echoing in rooms that once carried silence, hands joined in prayer instead of pointing in blame. This is not an impossible dream, it is the very desire of God for your marriage. He longs to restore what the enemy tried to destroy, to rebuild the ruins into a fortress of love, and to turn the story of your pain into a beacon of hope for others. And when that day comes, you will look back at this valley and see it differently. It will no longer be remembered as the place where everything ended, but as the place where everything was reborn. You will see that the tears you shed in private were never wasted. The prayers you whispered in faith were never ignored. And the patience you endured was the very bridge God used to carry you into victory. Every scar in your marriage tells a story, and while those stories may carry pain, they also carry proof that you have survived storms that others would have surrendered to. Sometimes, the enemy tries to convince you that scars are marks of failure, reminders of where love broke down, but God sees them differently. He sees them as reminders of where He kept you, where He sustained you, where He refused to let the covenant be torn apart. The very scars that cause you shame are the same scars He will use as testimonies of grace. Think of it, every tear you cried in silence, every argument that left you feeling defeated, every season where you wondered if love could ever breathe again, none of it has been wasted. God has collected those moments and is weaving them into a testimony so powerful that not only will your marriage stand renewed, but countless others will look at your story and find hope for their own. And here lies a truth you cannot afford to forget. God does not restore halfway. He is not interested in surface-level peace or a fragile truce that lasts only until the next conflict. When He moves, He restores fully, deeply, and permanently. He does not just heal what is visible. He goes into the hidden places, into the insecurities, the fears, the unspoken disappointments, and He uproots them so that new life can take root. Restoration is not about pretending nothing ever happened. It is about building something unshakable on the other side of the pain. What He desires for your marriage is not simply survival, but strength, a love that has walked through the fire and emerged purified, a covenant that has endured trials and now stands as a monument of His faithfulness. That kind of restoration cannot be fabricated by human effort. It can only be birthed by divine hands. So today, let your heart choose hope over despair, even if it feels unnatural. Let your lips speak life over your marriage, even if your emotions resist it. Begin to declare that your home is a place of peace, that your spouse is a gift, that your covenant is not broken, but being rewritten by the author of love Himself. When you do this, something begins to shift in the atmosphere. Heaven responds to faith-filled declarations. Angels move on behalf of prayers whispered through tears, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the walls that seemed immovable begin to weaken, the silence begins to crack, and the warmth of God's presence begins to fill the spaces that once felt cold. One day, you will wake up and realize that the change you long for is no longer a distant dream. It is your reality, a reality that testifies that God can make all things new. There are moments when the weight of broken promises feels heavier than the vows that were once spoken with joy. You may look at your spouse and see not the person who once made your heart race, but the one who now stirs disappointment or even resentment. And yet, buried beneath the layers of pain, the truth remains. The same God who witnessed your covenant has never turned His eyes away from it. He remembers every word spoken that day, and He still honors what you thought had been lost. This is why He whispers hope into your heart even when despair feels louder. He reminds you that His power is not limited by human failure. What seems irreparable to you is simply the perfect stage for Him to show that His grace is stronger than every wound. Your marriage may feel fragile now, but in His hands, fragile things are made whole again. But to see this wholeness, you must be willing to let go of the idea that restoration depends only on your spouse changing. Change begins within you, within your heart, your attitude, your willingness to extend grace even when you feel it isn't deserved. That is not weakness. It is faith. It is choosing to reflect God's nature instead of feeding the cycle of bitterness. Each time you decide to forgive, you loosen the grip of the enemy on your home. Each time you speak words of encouragement rather than criticism, you water the seeds of healing. And each time you pray sincerely for your spouse instead of resenting them, you are inviting heaven's intervention. The greatest shifts happen not through force, but through surrender. And as you surrender, you will see that God's Spirit has the power to do more in one moment than years of striving ever could. The day will come when you look back on this season and realize that what you thought was the end was actually the beginning of something stronger. The intimacy you long for, the joy you miss, the unity you crave, they are not gone forever. They are waiting on the other side of your perseverance. And when you step into that renewal, it will not just be about feeling love again, it will be about living in a covenant that has been tested and proven unshakable. Your home will no longer carry the sound of division, but the sound of laughter, prayer, and peace. And you will stand as living proof that God does not waste pain. He transforms it into the foundation of testimonies that echo for generations. What feels unbearable now will one day be the very story that inspires others to believe in hope. When everything else tells them to give up, there's a moment in every marriage where the question rises in the heart: is it worth continuing? You may feel like you've poured out everything, your patience, your forgiveness, your energy, yet the results seem small compared to the effort. That question, whispered in the silence of the night, is not a sign of failure but of desperation. And even in that desperation, God is near. He leans into your brokenness and reminds you that love is not measured by convenience, but by endurance. The covenant you carry was never meant to be fueled only by fleeting emotions, but by a love anchored in Him, a love that refuses to surrender when storms rage. And though you may not see it now, every act of endurance, every prayer spoken through tears, every decision to stay when leaving felt easier, is sowing seeds that will grow into a testimony stronger than anything you ever imagined. Do not underestimate the unseen work of God in the heart of your spouse. You may look at them and see distance, coldness, or even resistance, but God sees the hidden battles they are fighting, the wounds you may not even know exist, the struggles they are too proud or too afraid to speak of. And while you pray, He is working. While you wait, He is softening. While you wonder if anything is changing, He is planting seeds deep within them that will bloom in the right season. Trust His timing. A farmer does not dig up the soil every day to check if the seed is growing. He waters it faithfully and waits. In the same way, you must water your marriage with prayer, with patience, with acts of kindness, even when you do not see instant results, because in the unseen, God is already at work. One day, the fruit of your faithfulness will be undeniable. The laughter you thought had been silenced will return. The tenderness that felt lost will awaken. The unity that seemed impossible will become your new reality. And when that day comes, you will understand why the battle was so fierce, because the enemy knew the impact your restored marriage would have, not only on you but on everyone who witnesses it. Your story will carry hope into homes that feel like they are collapsing, into hearts that feel like giving up, into generations that need to see that love anchored in God cannot be destroyed. What the enemy meant for division, God will use for redemption, and your marriage will shine as proof that He makes all things new. There are battles in marriage that feel invisible to the outside world, struggles no one else can see, because they take place in the quiet spaces of your heart and home. On the surface, people may think everything looks fine, but behind closed doors, the weight of silence, tension, and disappointment tells a different story. And yet, it is in these hidden battles that God often chooses to reveal His greatest victories. He sees the tears you never speak of, the frustration you never voice, the loneliness you feel even when someone is sitting beside you. He knows the questions you carry, questions about love, about trust, about whether things will ever change. And His answer is clear: yes, they can. Not because you are strong enough, not because your spouse is perfect enough, but because He is faithful enough. What is impossible with man is still possible with God, and your covenant rests in His hands. You may feel that your marriage has been reduced to ashes, but Scripture reminds us that God gives beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, and praise for despair. Ashes are not the end, they are the proof that something once burned, and they are the very material God uses to bring forth new beginnings. When you surrender your brokenness to Him, He does not simply sweep the ashes away, He reshapes them into something breathtaking, something stronger and more enduring than before. Think of how a diamond is formed. It comes from intense pressure, from seasons of darkness, from conditions that seem unbearable. And yet, from that process comes something precious, something unbreakable. In the same way, the pressure your marriage is facing is not meant to destroy you, but to create something that will outshine the past. And when that transformation begins to manifest, the testimony will not only change your home, but ripple outward to others. Friends will see it. Your children will see it. Generations to come will inherit the fruit of the decision you make today to endure, to believe, to fight for what God has blessed. Your home will become more than a place of survival. It will become a sanctuary of love, a refuge of peace, a living altar where God's presence dwells. And when you look back, you will not just thank Him for the victory, you will thank Him for the valley. For it was in the valley that you learned to lean on Him fully, to love beyond feelings, and to trust beyond sight. What you thought was the end will stand as the place where God wrote a new beginning. And that beginning will be more beautiful than anything you could have scripted on your own. There comes a point in every journey of restoration when you realize that the true battle was never against your spouse, but against the lies that tried to convince you it was over. The real war has always been spiritual, against the whispers that told you love had died, against the heaviness that convinced you there was no future, against the schemes designed to divide what God Himself joined together. And yet, in the very moment when the enemy shouted defeat, God was already preparing victory. He has not abandoned the covenant He blessed, and He has not stepped back from the promises He declared over your home. If you listen closely, You will hear his voice above the noise, reminding you that your marriage is still a story he is writing, and that his pen never runs out of ink. What looks like the final chapter of despair will, in his hands, become the introduction to a testimony of redemption. But here is the key: you cannot rebuild your home on the same foundation that allowed cracks to form. God does not just patch holes, he lays new foundations. That means letting him touch the areas of your life you've tried to keep hidden, the unspoken resentment, the quiet bitterness, the places where disappointment has hardened into silence. He wants to go deeper than surface-level reconciliation. He wants to uproot the pride, heal the wounds, and soften the places that have grown numb. And while this process may feel uncomfortable, it is the only way to build something that will endure. Because a marriage restored by God is not fragile, it is fortified. It does not fear future storms because it has been anchored in grace. And when you allow him to rebuild from the ground up, you will see that the very things that once threatened to destroy you have now become the pillars holding you firm. And when the restoration is complete, your home will not look the same, nor will it feel the same. It will carry a peace that cannot be explained, a joy that cannot be manufactured, and a unity that cannot be shaken. You will find yourselves not just existing together, but thriving together, walking hand in hand into a future more beautiful than your past. And when others look at your story, they will see more than just two people who decided to stay. They will see a God who still performs miracles in the most intimate places of our lives. They will see that love, when anchored in him, does not run dry but becomes a well that never ceases to flow. And as you live out that testimony, you will know in the depths of your soul that every tear, every prayer, and every moment of perseverance was worth it. Because God has turned your ashes into beauty, your sorrow into joy, and your brokenness into a story of hope for the world. This is the moment where everything begins to shift, the place where despair gives way to hope, and where the silence that once echoed through your home is replaced with the voice of God, declaring life over your marriage. Hear this clearly: the same power that raised Christ from the dead is the power that is breathing into your covenant right now. What once felt lifeless is being revived. What once seemed shattered is being pieced together. And what once looked like an ending is being rewritten as a testimony of new beginnings. You may have thought this message was just another video, just another word, but no. This is divine intervention. It is the Father's way of reminding you that he has not given up on you, and he will not let your story end in brokenness. The author of love is holding the pen, and he is writing a chapter more beautiful than anything you imagined when you first said "I do." Lift your eyes and see that the God who started this good work is faithful to complete it. Do not measure the future by the pain of the past. Do not let yesterday's wounds rob you of tomorrow's promises. What he is birthing in your home will not be fragile like before. It will be rooted, strong, unshakable. Your children will witness this transformation. Your family will be touched by this restoration, and your future will be secured by the testimony of what God has done. Every tear you've shed, every prayer you've whispered, every moment you've chosen to endure, he has seen it all, and he is turning it into glory. Soon you will look back and realize that the valley you walked through was not meant to destroy you, but to lead you into a mountaintop where joy overflows and peace reigns. So declare it now. With faith in your heart: my marriage will change. My home will be restored. My covenant will stand. These are not empty words. They are prophetic declarations aligned with the will of heaven. Do not leave this moment doubting, leave it believing. Believe that God is already moving in ways unseen. Believe that his timing is perfect, and believe that what he has joined together no one can separate. This is your turning point, your new beginning, your divine confirmation that love will rise again. And when it does, your story will not only mark your life, but will shine as a beacon of hope to others who are walking the same dark road. Today, let faith take the place of fear, let hope silence despair, and let love, true, unshakable, God-breathed love be the foundation of everything yet to come.